Hi, I'm Dave Welch, the founder and president of the U.S. Pastor Council based in Houston, Texas, the host of the Christian Citizen Podcast, an organization and a ministry of, by, and for pastors. And for 22 years now, have been leading the way in speaking to issues of the day, engaging on those issues in our communities, leading our people to vote faithfully, vote biblically, and restore the concept of citizenship as a functioning ministry of the local church. And as part of that, this podcast that we've initiated to help to promote this whole concept and to become engaged this new year in 2025 is, once again, we have fresh opportunities. We're looking forward into this new year, but we can also never forget that we are the beneficiaries of a heritage, of a legacy. Just recently, I had the opportunity to find more information, for example, about my own personal family's history, which I had done some research into, but going back into the 14 and 1500s in Scotland, I have some clergy that were Presbyterian there at the time that were part of my heritage. And one of those in particular, John Welch, who married John Knox's daughter. Those of you who are familiar with John Knox, was one of the premier founders of the Presbyterian Church, and who carved a deep niche on his own merits of being what they called him, the man who could not be stopped. And so that was very profound for me and on a personal level. But on a national level, our heritage is incredible. And so often today, we have lost sight of who we are based on who we were, and especially in the church today. And that's really our focus here. Look, we're starting here in Texas. We're getting ready to start the Texas legislative session again, which meets every 2 years, unlike some states which actually meet every year. Thank the Lord. In Texas, it's only every other year, but there's still a lot to do. The very first thing that the Texas legislature will do, as every body does, every house that they convene, just as we just did with Congress, is the very first vote that they cast. And in some cases, we've been told 3 years, is the most important vote. And that's the vote for speaker. And the speaker of the House is important because that position has the authority and moves forward with a number of critical things. First of all, they appoint all the committee chairs. And as anybody who's worked with legislation understands, that whoever chairs the committee, pretty much, if they choose to exercise that, has nearly dictatorial control over what bills are heard and what are not. Now, if they're a good chair, they'll be obviously listening to their committee members. They'll be doing things that have a strong interest by other committee members and by the public. They'll have those ears on. But unfortunately, very frequently, we run into cases where that chairmanship is wielded with very heavy hand. And we've had bills die that never were even heard in committee because the chair didn't want them to be. So the one who appoints those chairs is the speaker, and that position is extremely important, as well as that speaker chooses a parliamentarian who gives them direction and guidance. And every time that the body meets on floor action on bills and activities, then they turn to that parliamentarian for direction. For example, when somebody makes a motion, calls a point of order. This is one of the favorite tactics to kill bills. Last session was calling a point of order. The parliamentarian would give direction to the chair. The chair would rule either for or against that point of order. Well, then that parliamentarian, just like a judge, has a liberal bent. And in this case, the Texas parliamentarian is actually a former Obama administration official. Then that can have an effect on the chairman's decisions. And he doesn't have to go by it, but he does very frequently, and then makes poor decisions. The other element that the speaker does, of course, is direct the floor action and process of how bills are heard and voted on the floor. And that's been a problem here in the Texas legislature in a variety of ways. But this time, this again is coming to light at this beginning of this session. And the speaker's race, which will be decided on the first day of the session, as the whole body will vote on either David Cook or Dustin Burke. And the Republican caucus has voted, and this is something that's come up over these last 6 or 8 years, especially since what we call the Gang of 11, if I recall correctly, back that where a small group of Republicans won over, worked with the Democrats to elect Joe Strauss as the speaker. And since that time, there's been these deals cut along the way to give committee chairs and inordinate legislative influence in many cases on critical issues to the minority party. And it's not that they should be shut out, but the fact of the matter is they are the minority party. And right now, anybody who's paying any attention understands that today, in today's world, places where the Democrats have majority, Republicans have no voice at all. And that's just simply the way it works. but yet they clamor and demand and insist that there be, proportional representation in this case. Well, look, we want to be, again, reasonable, but this is not a game we're playing here. This isn't something where, well, everybody's happy when we go home because you got part of your deal. The decisions the legislature makes are literally can be life and death. They are affecting, every bill affects people's lives in real tangible ways. And the fact of the matter is they are exercising authority given by government, but that government authority, first of all, begins with the authority that comes from God alone and given to the people. The people delegate that authority to our representatives. So all this comes down to the exercising of laws that affect people's lives that are based on certain principles, either good or bad. And those decisions are based on who casts those votes and what's their worldview, what is their value system. And so that process itself is very effectively driven by who is the speaker. So we're urging and calling on our state representatives to, first of all, the Republican Party was elected as the majority party by the voters of the state of Texas. The Republican Party, in both its party platform for a number of years now, as well as in the state party directives by the executive committee, as well as the Republican caucus itself at the legislative level, including by Dustin Burrows, who helped write these rules, says the Republican caucus should convene, vote for a speaker, and then they all get behind that candidate for speaker. That's simple, process that should be followed. Well, it's not being followed now, unfortunately, by Dustin Burrows. And Dustin Burrows, I believe, is a decent man who has a decent record as a representative, sort of strongly pro-life. Not criticizing that. What we're saying here is that the Republican majority should govern the legislature, should chair the committees, and should exercise that pro-life, pro-family, pro-marriage, pro-religious freedom, pro-taxpayer philosophy that elected them, and carry out that accordingly. So this is something that's an important issue going on right now. And pastors, as an organization, as a ministry, we have in the past, and we can legally, even as a 501c3, advocate for a particular speaker. It's not an elected position on a public ballot. So even the courts have directed that we can do that. We're not openly saying for one candidate or the other, but the fact of the matter is right now that one candidate has made a firm, clear commitment to place only the Republicans, the majority, in this committee chairs and pursue that agenda, which is established in the platform, again, which is clearly pro-life, pro-family, pro-religious freedom, does not cater to the radical LGBTQ agenda, it's pro-public safety, pro-borders, and push that forward. So, look, this is real life. This is part of our role as citizens. Whatever happens in that legislature is on us. We, the people, are responsible for it. So whatever they do, we ultimately stand before God and account for. So that's what we're asking them to do this session. And this is part of our, again, it goes back to our heritage. One of the things that we talk to pastors about is this is the historic role of the church. There's a book that we use reference frequently, urge all pastors to have on your shelf. And it's called Political Sermons of the Founding Era. And this is actually dated from 1730 to 1805. These are sermons. There's over 55 sermons in this particular book, spanning over 75 years from 1730 to 1805, of pastors who were giving, prominent pastors of that age, who were giving sermons on every different subject you can think of. And it was really fascinating just to read introductions here and the contents, giving the titles of these sermons, starting out in Pastor Benjamin Coleman, giving on government, the pillar of the earth. You can go through the presence of God with his people by Samuel Dunbar, Jonathan Mayhew, who gave a sermon called Concerning Unlimited Submission to Higher Authorities, and exegesis and of Romans 13. You can go all the way through here. It's a dialogue between the devil and George III, tyrant of Britain. Dangers of our national prosperity and the way to avoid them. Sermon delivered at the annual election and on through. And you see as a common pattern here of pastors accepting the premise that they're charged with speaking to everything affecting their people's lives. Nothing that was going on in the world was off limits because it all belonged to God. And Reverend William Gordon, who, of course, is one of the premier's pastors of the day, who, of course, Gordon College was named after, said in one of his sermons, "It is certainly a duty of the clergy to accommodate their discourses to the times, to preach against such sins as are most prevalent, and to recommend such virtues as are most wanted. You have frequently remarked that though the partisans of arbitrary power will freely censure that preacher who speaks boldly for the liberties of the people, They will admire as an excellent divine the parson whose discourse is wholly in the opposite, and teaches that magistrates have a divine right for doing wrong and are to be implicitly obeyed, men professing Christianity as if the religion of the blessed Jesus bound them tamely to part with their natural and social rights and slavishly to bow their neck to any tyrant. Okay. So this was a common thread of our founding fathers and men of the area. And go back to my own ancestor, John Welch. He was actually persecuted, and he was banned from his native Scotland and from England by the king at the time, James, for preaching Protestant theology against the dominant Catholic religion of the time and the individual freedoms that went along with that, and was sent to France and was actually persecuted there as well. So our history of faith, going clear back to the beginning of the martyrdom of the disciples, has been one of truth in the face of persecution. And we now have an opportunity in 2025 to fully engage the church, to take where we are right now. We have an opportunity of what we're calling the window of hope, that we can have the leaders that we were just placing in office. Donald Trump will be taking the oath of office and inaugurated on January 20th, but they're not the hope. Christ is still the hope of America. And it is the pulpits lighting up with righteousness and justice, the truth of the word of God, bringing redemption to the people's hearts and lives and families that are really going to be the transforming power of what we desperately need right now. So the Pastors Council, that's what we're calling all of our pastors to do. We'll need to be showing up in Austin as we go forward here. But in the meantime, pastors, get ready. We ought to have a busy year, but God's grace is on us. We have freedom and the opportunity to do what all of our ancestors before us have done, is to give the full measure of our devotion, to lay down our lives for those that God has called us to serve, to speak that truth boldly, and to bring it to the city around us, take the ground God has placed us in for Christ, and to show the love that he's placed in us to the people around us by standing against darkness and for light. So thank you for serving. Thank you for leading, and thank you for those who have supported this ministry of helping us to engage pastors across all these lines, to come together, form teams, and move forward to take this ground back for Christ. Thank you. God bless you. As we conclude another enlightening episode of the Christian Citizen Podcast, we want to share a mission that resonates with our values. The U.S. Pastor Council, a beacon of courage, unity, and faith, is calling on you to partner with us. This pastor-led ministry, deeply rooted in biblical principles, aims to empower pastors and their congregations across racial and denominational lines to impact our culture and community through concerted prayer and effective action. Your support and donations can help us build strong, functioning teams of pastors in every corner of our cities, creating a grassroots network that could truly make a difference. Together, we can bring about Christ-centered change in our communities, provide resources for pastors, and connect with our leaders. This is more than just a donation. It's an opportunity to be part of a movement, to answer a call that echoes across the plains of Texas and even coast to coast. It's a chance to unite under a common cause and make a real impact. So we urge you, our listeners, to donate today and join us in our mission to bring about true transformation. Together, we can answer the call. Visit us at uspastorcouncil.org. That's uspastorcouncil.org. Thank you for being a part of this journey.